This is part 3 of non-resurrectionism. We will continue these parts until we get up to old school Baptist times. But in our case, we cover centuries after the early church was established by the apostles. We have a group called the Docetists, who believed that Christ did not come in the flesh, and therefore he could not have resurrected in the flesh. Of course, there were men at that time who are called by some the church fathers who objected to this doctrine. Some of them, Irenaeus, Tertullian, and Justin Martyr, insisted on a bodily resurrection. You would think that this would be fairly obvious from 1 Corinthians 15, but apparently not. During the Reformation, there were some so-called Anabaptist radicals, certain groups only, who denied any physical resurrection. They believed in a spiritual resurrection. We have an example of a man named Hans Denk from 1500 to 1527. He leaned toward a spiritual-only understanding of salvation and resurrection, very influenced by mysticism. An example is Faustio Zozzini, aka Faustus Socinius. The Socinians, Unitarians before Unitarianism existed, denied Christ's pre-existence and bodily resurrection. They denied a future bodily resurrection of the wicked, sometimes even for the righteous. They taught a moral resurrection. There were the spiritualists and mystical reformers. Some mystical or spiritualist thinkers rejected or radically redefined the resurrection as a present inner event rather than a future one. Example: Sebastian Frank, 1499 to 1542. He denied many traditional doctrines and believed the resurrection was symbolic, an inner birth, not a future physical event. There were also the deists and rationalists. They lived mostly during the late Reformation or post-Reformation era. Toward the late 1600s and 1700s, early Enlightenment thinkers began rejecting miracles and supernatural claims, including the bodily resurrection. Two examples we can mention is Matthew Tyndall, Tyndal, Christianity as Old as the Creation, 1730s, he wrote that. There was Thomas Hobbes, believed in a material soul, but his views on resurrection were highly controversial and vague. Into the 1700s, there was Anthony Collins. From 1676 to 1729, he published a discourse of the grounds and reasons of the Christian religion. He criticized biblical prophecy and resurrection as irrational. There was Thomas Morgan, who died in 1743. He rejected miracles and supernatural events, argued that resurrection was symbolic. Of course, there was Thomas Paine, a famous American patriot, who lived from 1737 to 1809. He wrote a book called The Age of Reason in the late 1700s, and he rejected resurrection and called it a priestly invention. So these were common views of these kinds of men at the time. There were also Joseph Priestley, leading figure in English Unitarianism. He denied Christ's deity and affirmed a kind of resurrection, but not in the orthodox bodily sense. Theophilus Lindsey, 1723 to 1808, founder of the first Unitarian congregation in England, He questioned miraculous elements of Christianity, including resurrection narratives. And of course, there was Charles Chauncey, an early Harvard professor. He leaned toward a spiritual resurrection, not a physical one. Even though Unitarians to this day use Christian terms, biblical terms, they don't mean what we mean by them. There were the rationalist biblical critics. For example, Herman Samuel Ramirez, 1694 to 1768. Part of the Wolfenbüttel fragments, he claimed Jesus' disciples stole his body and fabricated the resurrection. He argued that Christianity evolved from Jesus' failed political messianism. We continue with Voltaire, who mocked Christianity's miracles and resurrection beliefs as, quote, barbaric and irrational. David Hume, from 1711 to 1776. While not directly denying the resurrection, he demolished the philosophical credibility of miracles, which of course undercut the resurrection indirectly. We continue with part 4, Lord willing, tomorrow.